Representative Norris, I am going to move Senate File 856 be before the committee for jurisdiction, and I will move that that bill be re-referred to judiciary. I understand that there is an A5 or DE5 amendment. I will move the DE5 to be before the committee. And I'm going to request a roll call vote on that DE5. And I would ask you to please explain the DE5. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn and members of the committee for considering my bill today. I put a lot of work into this amendment to make the Office of the Inspector General as strong and effective as possible from day one. After months of hearing from experts, constituents, and legislators across the political spectrum. Fraud prevention isn't about politics. It's about making sure our programs work for Minnesotans. I'll walk you through every intentional and meticulous change I made to my bill and the reasons for each change. But first, I want to tell you why I do this work. I worked hard on this bill because, quite frankly, I'm furious about fraud. I'm furious about for-profit scammy businesses stealing from Minnesotans and our public services and programs. It's unacceptable. Every dollar lost to criminal fraud is a dollar that should have been going to feed, care for, and support vulnerable Minnesotans. These programs are absolutely essential for the people they serve. Public dollars should be going to help parents pay for childcare, people with disabilities get the support they need, and elders to age with dignity, not line the pockets of for-profit fraudsters. Together, we have to do everything we can this session to work this out. Greedy for-profit corporations have created a business model of fraud and made public programs their mark. We're determined to dismantle the business model of fraud and take action to prevent, detect, investigate, and punish the greedy fraudsters who drain our community resources. It's why we passed anti-fraud measures in 23 and 24, and again in 2025, as our understanding of the scope of the problem and the particular vulnerabilities of our programs evolved. It's also why the House DFL is proposing a robust anti-fraud package this session to address the root causes of the business model of fraud, with this bill included. And it's the reason I teamed up with Senator Gustafson to introduce this bill to create a statewide independent Office of the Inspector General last session. About the bill, there are several features that make this concept an effective tool against fraud. First is its independence. While constitutionally the governor must ultimately appoint the OIG, a bipartisan group of legislators, modeled after the Legislative Audit Commission, will vet potential candidates and forward recommendations, which will require support from both parties, to the governor. This fixes an issue with the initial bill, which likely would have gotten it stalled in court when we need this office to start work immediately. Importantly, once appointed, the Inspector General can only be removed from office for cause after a public hearing and with the approval of 3/5 of the Senate, and thanks to this Delete Everything Amendment, or DE Amendment, 3/5 of the House. Second is its sweeping investigative powers. Under this DE, the OIG will have the authority to investigate any public or private entity that receives public funds to ensure compliance with applicable laws, conduct inspections, evaluations, and investigations of state executive branch agencies, issue subpoenas and refer matters for civil, criminal, or administrative actions to the BCA, and seek a court order, or where required by federal law, make a recommendation to the relevant commissioner to seek a court order, freezing or ceasing distributions of funds when fraud or a credible allegation of fraud is uncovered. The third is its transparency. The OIG will be required to publish reports upon completion of an investigation summarizing its findings, recommendations, and outcomes of its activities. It'll have to submit an annual report summarizing its work to the legislature and the public. And it will have to report to the legislature regarding all investigations the OIG did not open after receiving a tip or complaint or decided to no longer actively pursue with an explanation of why. Minnesotans deserve an OIG with independence, transparency, and the sweeping investigative powers to get this essential work done. I want to commend my Republican colleague, Representative Patty Anderson, for bringing forward her own OIG proposal last year. It jump-started a very collaborative and bipartisan process by which members of all 4 legislative caucuses between the House and the Senate met weekly last year for hours at a time with a goal of merging our ideas and concepts. Those 4 caucus talks were incredibly beneficial and led to significant improvement of this bill. This amendment is built on that bipartisan foundation. It's based on countless conversations in the interim with legislators, the OLA, constituents, and other stakeholders to get the bill in the best possible form that is also constitutional, so it can start eliminating fraud on day one. So let's walk through the main differences between the DE and the version that passed the Senate. First, and most importantly, we have enhanced the powers and duties of the office to focus more on preventing fraud before it occurs, rather than simply investigating fraud after the fact. We know from existing cases that it is often very challenging to recover stolen funds after they're out the door. As a result, it is more cost-effective for us to prioritize preventing those dollars from fraudulently going out the door in the first place. If this office and our anti-fraud package becomes law, there will be less fraud requiring investigation. In that case, the OIG will have more power to proactively prevent situations that could lead to it. We also work closely with the Office of the Legislative Auditor to make sure the bill more clearly delineates between the duties of the OIG and the OLA. Second, this DE keeps the Department of Education Inspector General within MDE to ensure subject matter expertise and proximity to the programs being supervised. Otherwise, we create slower systems with more bureaucracy and less ability to be effective. There is a reason the federal government requires state agencies administering Medicaid and other benefits to keep the primary investigators in the agencies that administer the program. It's best practice. There is a benefit to having day-to-day working knowledge of the programs and systems for which you are ensuring program integrity, rather than just parachuting in when something goes wrong. Also, federal law is already requiring us to keep the DHS, DCYF, and Department of Health IGs within their agencies. So it only makes sense to do the same with the MDE. We codify the statewide OIG coordinating committee as well as part of this DE. This was established by executive order last fall. The executive branch reports that this is already proving to be a very useful tool for coordinating fraud response across state enterprise. So we felt it made sense to codify it into law. It breaks down silos to facilitate sharing of best practices and data in real time. As proposed in the DE, the centralized IG would chair the committee. Other members would include the commissioner or their designee of each agency that has its own inspector general, the BCA, the Office of Grants Management in the Department of Administration, and the Internal Controls and Accountability Unit in MMB. This committee would meet monthly to share investigative data, trends, and other information to better prevent, detect, and investigate fraud and misuse in agency programs. It would assist the Inspector General in the development of data sharing methods, investigative best practices, and program integrity review processes for agency programs. And it would assist agencies in securing specialized internal audit, investigation, or other necessary skills and tools. The addition of this committee would give the OIG more tools it needs to have the broad effect we intend across state government. The DE, fourth, removes the proposed OIG Anti-Fraud and Waste Bureau. This will avoid duplication of work the BCA's Financial Crimes Division already does. It will also avoid the fiscal inefficiencies that come with small law enforcement agencies. It just makes sense. While we're giving the OIG so many absolutely essential tasks to catch and prevent fraud across state government, why would we also task it with work other law enforcement is already doing? I have great confidence in the brave men and women of the BCA, and I hope this committee does too. Lastly, we fully fund the anticipated costs of establishing and running this agency to ensure this office has the necessary resources to do its job in a quality manner. The appropriation currently in the DE reflects the fiscal note from the Senate version of the bill. We anticipate the numbers are going to change a little bit based on some of the revisions in this DE. We've requested a revised fiscal note and intend to update the appropriation language at that time. But the current language is intended to reflect our commitment to fully funding this office, again, so they can be effective on day one. And last but certainly not least, it fixes some drafting oversights that slipped through in last year's end of session rush that would have rendered the bill unconstitutional. We believe these are common sense changes that strengthen the bipartisan foundation that passed the Senate, while still maintaining the key features of the office, like its independence, those sweeping investigative powers, and transparency. To be clear, a vote against this DE would be a vote against a focus on preventing fraud in the first place, rather than simply investigating it after the fact. Breaking down silos that prevent the sharing of best practices and real-time data, which would cause unnecessary headaches and more work for the Inspector General. Fully funding the work of preventing and fighting fraud. It won't work if we don't fund it, and much more. While we would love to pass the bill into law in the form of this DE, we're also realistic that there will likely be additional changes as this bill progresses through the process. I've learned in my time here in the legislature that bills become better and more effective with time and intentional conversations. And we need this bill to be as perfect as it can be to solve this most important problem. We welcome reaction to the DE and look forward to refining the language through continued caucus talks and discussion with Representative Anderson once we've had an opportunity to publicly present our vision for a statewide OIG. I'm fully aware that this is going to take both Democratic and Republican votes for this idea to become law. And achieving that is going to require give and take on all sides to come to a solution that everybody can get behind. This proposed OIG is a powerful office meant to address a critical concern. But that power is the very reason why we must move in a thoughtful, diligent manner in crafting this legislation, rather than reflexively adopting language we received from the Senate. I ask that you all support my author's amendment, one that is a result of hours of work and collaboration. Minnesotans deserve a fully funded OIG that can fix this problem with all the tools they need to prevent, catch, and prosecute fraud on day one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, if you would go to the testifier's table, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Two questions that came to me that I would like for you to clarify as nonpartisan. I made the re-referral to judiciary. I believe that would be the next appropriate step. That's my opinion. Could you please explain to me if this bill would be required to go to judiciary?
Madam Chair and members, there is a House rule that requires bills that make substantial changes to data practices law to be referred to the Judiciary Finance and Civil Law Committee prior to second reading. The rule that I'm referring to, I don't have the number with me right now, but I can find it when I'm back at my seat. It does, though, say the chair of the Judiciary Committee is ultimately the judge of which bills do not need to go to that committee, and will advise the speaker accordingly.
Thank you very much. And then the second question I have for you is about a DE amendment. It has been the custom for me as chair of this committee to allow an author to have their bill in the condition that they would like it in. But can you speak from a nonpartisan state, what do we train chairs to do about DE amendments?
Madam Chair and members, I work for the House Research Department. We do provide training for chairs of both caucuses. During the training, we typically do talk about authors' amendments and customs for authors' amendments in committees. But I do think it's important that the custom is based on, my experience and that of my colleagues. And until last year, no one in my office had staffed a tied house or a committee with equal membership between the two caucuses. So we're sort of in uncharted territory a bit in terms of custom, but what I do say when I assist with the training for chairs is that it, in my experience, is customary at the first committee stop for an author's amendment to be adopted so the author can get the bill in the shape that they prefer.
Okay. And then could you please tell me, because I have no history of this myself, when a Senate file is sent over, the Committee of Jurisdiction has to adopt that language. So this has stopped being a House file number and becomes a Senate file number. Do you have any recollection of a House author not being able to put their own DE on a House to adopt House language?
Madam Chair and members, you're correct that when the Senate passes the companion to a House file and the House file is still in committee, the Senate companion is received by the House and referred to the committee, and then the committee sets aside the House file and works from the Senate file. Have I seen an instance in my time where the House author was not allowed to insert their own language into the Senate file? Not that I recall, but it's possible. I feel like Ms. Roberts and I compared notes. We think we've seen it all at one time or another, but I don't recall that particular scenario.
Thank you very much. And I would ask the CA to please, or the
Madam Chair.
CLA to please take the
Madam
roll
Chair,
on the DE.
I would like to have a question
Chair
about the
Cleavorn.
amendment, Madam
Chair
Chair.
Cleavorn, aye.
Representative Nash,
Nash votes no.
Representative Bonner,
Yes.
Representative Bonner,
Yes.
Representative Davis,
No.
Representative Anderson,
Anderson, no.
Representative Clardy,
Aye.
Representative Freeberg,
Yes.
Representative Jones,
Yes.
Representative Joy. Representative Koznick. Representative Kraft,
Aye.
Representative Nikolai,
Yes.
Representative Quam.
Your testifier did not bring up actual occurrences, which I remember that
Representative
didn't
Quam.
follow that.
We are in a roll call vote.
Well,
Please
that's
state your
because
roll.
the chair would not allow questions.
Representative Quam,
Yet.
That's a no in another
Repres-
language.
Representative Sexton,
No.
Chairwoman, there are 7 ayes and 7 nays.
With 7 ayes and 7 nays, the motion does not prevail. The DE is not adopted.
Madam Chair, question of the chair.
Pardon?
Madam Chair, it is customary,
Excuse
since
me.
we're going to be hung up on
Excuse me.
custom, to
You-
allow an amendment to receive questions. I had questions. I alerted you to the fact that I had questions and had comments.
And no, I'm sorry, you did not.
Well, I most certainly did.
You did not.
I most certainly did. And I will point out to you that while custom says, and you and I talked about this yesterday, you said custom says that you should always allow for a DE or an author's amendment to go on. And I told you at the time that I had seen it happen before, and I was searching my memory, but what happened yesterday in the Health Committee was DFL members not allowing authors' amendments to go on to GOP bills.
Excuse
So that
me,
happened
we are
yesterday.
discussing this committee. We do not
So,
discuss other committees in this
Precedents that you
committee.
asked was of in the House. I provided an example for you. Moreover, the fact that we voted no against the DE was stakeholders are an important aspect of what we do here at the Capitol. Stakeholders are people on the inside and the outside of the Capitol, members of the Senate, members of the House, and I will remind you, Madam Chair, that I and my caucus are stakeholders. You didn't bring this bill to our attention. We only learned about the content of the DE when it posted, and that is a significant reason why we voted no, because we didn't have a chance to actually weigh in on it. In talking with members of the Senate who actually had crafted the Senate file themselves, they said that they had also not been consulted. So, and in Representative Norris's words, this is a wide sweeping, grandiose DE amendment, and we were not consulted.
I will address the committee as a whole, and then I will go to you, Representative Norris. The custom that I have set for bills is that we adopt the DE and then we move to discussion. The DE was not adopted, therefore there is no discussion on the DE. It was not adopted by the committee, therefore, basically, it doesn't exist. So for you, Representative Norris, I am sorry that we have brought you here early in the morning, only to have the work of the House ignored and left unadopted. I apologize to you. I have never seen that in this committee. The other thing is I would like to thank you for the incredible work that you did over the interim, including the Senate author. And I have spoken to the Senate author myself, who does not disagree with this process, because where there are disagreements, there is growth. And so to have two bills that are not exactly the same brings us growth and better policy and better procedure. It is unfortunate that my colleagues did not agree to allow discussion on this bill by denying you your DE amendment. And with that, members, the work of this committee is, I'll let you speak and then I will adjourn. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn. Like I said, we should be putting people over politics here. We need the OIG to be as strong and effective as possible on day one. And every change I made served that mission. I am happy to continue conversations with any member of this committee, and I hope I can earn your vote in a future hearing. Fraud prevention should not be about politics or parties. It should be about excellent and well thought out government practices. I truly hope we can schedule this bill for another hearing sometime soon so that we can pass the version that I believe will best achieve the vision and outcomes we have for Minnesota. So thank you, Chair Cleavorn.